Did you hear about the Mexican?
All right, we're recording now, so all racist jokes will stop.
No. It's not racist.
Yeah. So as you all saw, I just removed a section from our wiki about classes. I feel, and Eric feels, that we need to talk more about functions. So today I'm going to introduce to you our final project, and then I'm going to use our learning on functions to, I'm going to use our learning on functions and apply it to parts of the final project so that you can hopefully understand the uses of functions a little more, okay? Today we're going to start by talking about the final project. So I just handed you all some materials. There are some materials that will show you what you need to understand in order to build the final project. And those materials are up here on the wiki as well. There's documentation section, there's a big picture section, and also some test data that you're going to need that I have provided for you out of my benevolence. So that is what is on the wiki today. Okay, let's talk about what this app is going to do. This app is an HSA forecaster, okay? It is going to, over a 5-year span, forecast your HSA balance, okay? It's going to forecast contributions, and it's going to forecast distributions or expenses or whatever you want to call them, okay? At the end of 5 years, you're going to get grand totals, your balance, how much you contributed over 5 years, how much you used or spent over 5 years, and also a grand total. But for every month in those 5 years, so 5 years has 60 months, we are going to put some output saying there was money contributed to your HSA or possibly money spent from your HSA, okay? And this is how we're going to accomplish this. I want to go over some assumptions first. So in the real world, you can only or should only contribute a certain amount of money to your HSA based on a couple different parameters. In our programming world, we are not going to respect an IRS contribution limit, okay? You can put as much into your HSA as you want every year with no limits. Maybe if you finish the program really early, then I will impose that on you, but not at this time. Okay, another thing is your HSA can go negative. We have guards in place here at Health Equity to prevent it from going very negative. For example, if you don't have money in your HSA, we're not going to let you use your HSA to spend, okay, sometimes. You should also assume, I'm going to talk about possible events that can happen every month. You can assume that there will ever only be one event that will happen during a month. You can assume that at the beginning of the 5 years, your HSA has a balance of $1,000. And you can also assume that the time span you're calculating for is from January 2019 to December 2023. That's 5 years, 60 months, okay? So this is what the final project should do. It's got a couple different sections. It should collect data from the user. It should collect data from a file. It should do some calculation, and it should display some output. Okay? So the very first thing it should do is ask the user a whole bunch of questions. It should ask the user for their age, for their activity level as a number from 1 to 5, where 1 is sedentary, 5 is marathon runner, right? It should ask for their nutrition level on the same scale, 1 to 5. It should ask them whether they're married. It should be a yes or no answer. The app should ask them for a number of covered dependents. Should also ask them for their dedication to savings on a scale from 1 to 5, and how they feel about their employer's benefits from 1 to 5, right? So what is that? That's 7 pieces of data that we're going to collect from them. Those are very important for our forecaster, right? If you are not very active and you don't eat well, you can bet that you're going to have more expenses, right? That's what this app will do. If you have really great health and really great savings habits, but you also have 20 kids, you're going to have a lot of HSA expenses, okay? Any questions about the input that we need from our user in this app? I'll show you how we're going to use these pieces of input here in just a minute. But any questions about, is anything unclear about how we collect the input or what the input is? Okay. Wonderful. All right, so that's input from the user. We also need to get input from a file. I have provided this file for you here on the wiki. Okay, you can take the contents of this test data section, copy them all, and save them in a file. It can be a .csv file, it can be a .txt file. I don't really care what type of file it is because our code will handle both. Hopefully it will handle both, okay? But you can see here that each line of the file is similar. For example, and this is all covered in the documentation, the format of each line in the file is like this. The very first piece of data before the first comma is the year, then a comma, then a month, then a comma, and a likelihood or event score. Event, I can't change it now. It's likelihood forever. Okay. Everyone correct that with ranch dressing or something. I don't know. Okay, an amount and a description, right? So that is the format of the file, and here are two examples of what the file can contain. And I'm probably going to change this test data. I just generated it in bulk for the purposes of today's class. Okay, but we have two lines in the file right here, example lines. So you can see the year, 2019. The month is 1, or in other words, January. The event score is 50, and this will hopefully make more sense just exactly what that means in a minute. The amount should be a money amount without the money sign. So this is $100 negative, right? So this model's spending $100. And a description of the event is the kids bring home a cold from school, so go see the doctor, right? So this is something that can relate to your HSA. This happened. This was the cost. This is when it happened. And this is how likely that it will happen to you, okay?
So all of this data is for one user?
All of this data is for one user. The user is going to input a bunch of data. We're going to import a bunch of events, and then we're going to do some calculations to see if these events are going to apply to these users, or to this user, okay? Any questions about the file? Okay. After you've collected all the data from the user, and you've collected the data from the file, you need to start calculating. There are several steps to this calculation. The very first thing we're going to do is add money to the HSA, okay? We are going to add money to the HSA based on the input that the user gave us. For example, these two pieces of data, how dedicated the user is to savings and how great the employer's benefits are. All right, so for the number that the user input on how dedicated they are to savings, we are going to take that number, 1 to 5, multiply it by 150, and if they said they were married, we are going to double it from there. Okay, this models the employee contribution to the HSA. So if their employer, oh, no. So this is the employee's contribution to their HSA. So if they're very dedicated to savings, we're going to be putting a lot of money into the HSA. If they're not very dedicated to savings, almost none. And if they're married, we're going to double it. This is how much money will go into their HSA every month. Okay, then we're going to do some calculation for the employer contribution. Okay, we are going to add, I need to correct this, but we're going to add, again, 150 times the 1 through 5 number that they input, right? We're going to say if their employer's benefits are not very good at all, their employer is going to put in 150 a month. If they're really great, it's 5 times 150, okay? And again, if you're married, double it. Any questions about adding money to the HSA? That's step 1 of the calculation. So for every month between January 2019 and December of 2023, you're going to add money to the HSA. So you got to kind of keep a running total, but you also need to calculate how much money we're going to input every month. Okay, next we're going to calculate the likelihood of an event from the file applying to the user based on their inputs. Okay, and this is going to be complicated. I'm going to talk about that here in a minute. So once we've calculated how likely it is that the event in the file will happen to us, we will apply it to the HSA. So if it did happen, if the likelihood score that we calculated is greater than or equal to the likelihood score in the file, then we are going to apply that event to our HSA balance. So remember, we have two lines right up here. The likelihood score is 50 here. So meaning a 50-50 chance. It's based on a 1 to 100 scale. Okay, the likelihood score of this happening, 100, this is definitely going to happen, right? So we calculated likelihood, which I'll talk about in a minute. If the likelihood is 50 or greater, we're going to lose $100 out of our HSA. But if this event happens to us, we're going to add $1,000 to our HSA. Okay, and that's the role of this file down here.
So those are just potential events.
Potential events, that's right. If the likelihood that we calculate based on all of your inputs is greater than or equal to the likelihood of the event in the file, we're going to apply it to your HSA. Okay? So add money to HSA, calculate likelihood, apply the event to your HSA. Okay? That's the calculation that you need to do for every month. As you're doing that calculation and after you're done doing that calculation, you're going to want to display some things to the console. So for example, every month I want to see a message that says how much money was added to the HSA, how much money was deducted from the HSA, and the description of any event that occurred. Okay? After I see that for all 60 months, I want grand totals. So over the 5-year span, I want a message that says the total amount contributed to your HSA over 5 years was X. The total amount deducted from your HSA over 5 years was Y. And the ending balance of the HSA should be output. And then the program's done. Okay, before we talk about the likelihood calculation, does anyone have any questions up to this point?
We allow it to go negative?
Yes, that was one of our assumptions. We are going to allow the HSA to go negative.
Okay.
Oh, so negative. Yep.
The reason why is because the user wants to know whether this is actually a good investment.
There you go. There you go. Okay, let's talk about likelihood. The likelihood algorithm is something that needs to run for every month. Once we have a likelihood score, we know if the event is going to apply to us or not. Okay, so this is how you need to calculate likelihood. The very first thing is you generate a random number, and this is their luck score, right? I've given you the code to generate a random number between 1 and 25. It's right here. So this is the base score for their likelihood. It's going to be a number between 1 and 25. If it's low, likelihood is low. If it's high, likelihood is high.
And it's just random.
It's a
No.
random number. Yep. Okay, then if they are married, you need to add 5 points to the likelihood score. You need to add 3 points to the likelihood score for every kid or covered dependent. Okay, then you're going to do an activity level calculation. It's going to be 10 minus their activity level times 2, right? So if they input an activity level of 2, moderately active, we're going to add 6 points to their likelihood score. So if you are very active and you put a 5, we're going to do 2 times 5 is 10 minus 10. We're going to add 0 points to your likelihood score. Okay? Nutrition level, same deal. If you have high nutrition, your likelihood will be lower. And then because they give us their age, we're going to add points based on the age. This is totally arbitrary. This is not how I feel about people of these ages. Just the older you are, the more likely something health-related will happen. That's all. No one get mad at me. Okay? So you...
Brings up a good question. Where did these kind of calculations and numbers come from?
they were... Yeah, they were... This is not based on any... This is based on my view of the world as I see it, and not science. Okay. All right. So... you're going to add all of these together, and this is the likelihood score. So let's say that this gave us a number 56. We're then going to pull an event for the applicable month and compare 56 to the likelihood of the event in the file. The likelihood here is 45, so 56 is greater than 45. This event happens to us. Broken arm, minus $100 to the HSA. Okay? Does anyone have any questions about likelihood?
So if your score is kind of like a baseline. So anything that's is it less than or equal to, or just less?
If it's greater than or equal to, the event will happen. But if it's less than, it will not happen.
Oh, okay. So 46, it will not.
It was 56.
So 56 is a score.
56 is greater than the event in the file, 45. So our likelihood score is greater than the required likelihood in the file. So the
Okay.
event will happen.
So if in the file the likelihood score is less than your score.
Then your calculated score, the event will not happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
The event will not happen.
Yes, if the likelihood of the event is 0, then it will never happen, right? Because I'm always going to calculate something more than 0,
Right.
probably. If I don't have any kids and I'm not married and I'm very unlucky
Okay.
and 0 nutrition, yeah.
Okay.
No, good, yeah, anyway.
It looks like at the end of 5 years, my arms are just gonna be shattered. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
You're breaking other people's arms.
So yeah, this is an example file. I will certainly provide more scenario files as we get farther along. This was bulk added so that I could show it to you today. But yeah, we'll have better scenarios coming up. So I asked someone who's recently been through Intro to C# if they thought this program was way too tough for someone who's just finishing Intro to C#, and the answer was if they can't, they're fired. So you should be able to, I'm just kidding. That you have two options here, okay? If you would like to try your hand at this app by yourself, I think that's a really great idea. I think it will be difficult, and I think you will grow immensely if you try it on your own. If you want to do that, I invite you for the next 4 sessions, including today, to bring headphones, sit in the back of the room, work on this by yourself, raise your hand when you get stuck, and we will be here to help you, okay? For anyone who does not want to build this by themselves, I'm going to build this app over the next 5 sessions, and we'll just build it all together. We can work as a group, and it will be high you involvement. We may rotate turns at the keyboard typing code and the class working on it together. So you have that option, right? So my number 1 pick would be please work on it on your own or with a partner. Please continue to come up here and get free lunch. If you do that, don't feel like you have to stay down at your desk. But we will build this together if you want to be part of that experience. So, okay, any questions about the final project at all?
Does this have an application?
What do you mean?
Will this be something that's used as kind of like a futuristic calculator?
Oh.
What could happen?
I mean, it could be. I am no probability scientist, right? So all of these likelihood scores are totally made up. But yeah, I mean, we could definitely fine tune this and add HSA forecasting to our website, right? Hey, how many kids do you have? How are you married? Like, what's your dedication to savings? And this is a scenario that could happen to you. And we give them several toggles. And yeah, you win with an HSA if you're a saver. You win with an HSA if you have high nutrition and high activity, right? So, I mean, potentially, but I have no plans to do this because once again, not statistical genius.
We already have something like this on our website. The how secure your account.
Yeah, the optimizer.
Optimizer. Balance calculator.
Yep.
I think we do better.
There you go. Well, here you go. This is the start of it. Okay.
There was a lot of work that went into Optimizer, by the way.
Good deal.
So even though we could do better, it's still a lot.
No, certainly not. Not a discount, but we'll picture.
Oh yeah. No, I did it.
All right. Hurt feelings aside, let's continue. I'm just kidding. No, it has benefited me, to tell you the truth. I've changed things because of it. So good job, Alpha. Okay, I want to now start talking about this project. So the flow chart that I provided to you is a basic flow of how the app can go. This is not a requirement, right? But if you wanted to follow this flow, you could, right? So the app will start. Is everybody familiar with flowcharts first off? Like you can see that we've got a starting point and an ending point and arrows that tell us which way to go, right? These blue boxes are activities. These diamonds are decisions. Leading out of a diamond, there's two paths usually, whether the answer is yes or no, right? So let's talk about this real quick. If I wanted to build a function to ask a user to enter age, what would that look like? Let's build it real quick. So I want to ask the user to enter the age, and not only enter their age, but if the user entered a valid age, I'm going to let them proceed, but if not, I'm going to ask them again and again and again until they type a valid age, right? So let's talk about what this function should look like. Quick overview of functions from last time. Remember that functions have a couple parts. There's the header. The header has a name, right? So what would be a good name for this function that I just described? Member age, okay. That's a start, I think. Get member age is also, that's better. Get member age from user, maybe, or get member age from file. Get valid member age, I like it. Okay, good name. Don't feel bad making your function names really, really long. If anyone does that, I heart you. Okay, a function has a name. A function has a parameter list. So what inputs do we need for this function? What inputs do we need to ask the user for their age? A number? Or would that be the output? Like if I come up and ask you your age and hand you a card that says 6, what are you going to do with that card that says 6? Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, but if I ask you your age and you hand me back a card that says 27, very meaningful, right? And I will keep it forever. I would never throw anything away that you give me. Okay. Oh, I have another birthday. I have to print a whole new set of cards.
So it probably depends on how you take the age in the main method, but we'll probably use through.
Okay. Another question to ask in our function. A function has a return type. So what should it return? Should it return a string? Should it return a number? How is it going to be used in our app? Do you remember anything about how the age will be used in our app? We do need it as an integer, right? Because we're going to say if it falls into any of these ranges right here, then I need to add likelihood points, right? So in order to do this, I need to be able to do greater than or less than comparisons. Okay? Back to functions. So that is the function header. Name, parameter list, everything is gone. What happened? Oh, there you go. Okay, and a return type. All right, the function body is grouped with curly brackets, right? So just like a loop, just like an if statement, we can depend on all of these statements inside of curly brackets executing when the function is called up until we hit a return statement. The return statement signals the end of our function, okay? And then calling a function, we refer to it by name, we provide some arguments to fill the parameters, and then we can store the return of the variable or the return of the function in a variable. So let's do this. Let's build a function for the very first blue box on there, which is, of course, I'm remembering, ask user to enter age, okay? I'm going to Visual Studio Code here. Got a question in the back? Oh, thank you, Randy, for reminding me. You did good, Austin. Randy did better. Okay. One question before we go.
The first thing that came to mind is instead of asking for each and every single one, can we make a function that would include the yes, no, for true, false if they get it right? Or is that something that's
We definitely can do that. Yeah, like validation. Like,
Yeah.
did you give me valid input?
so instead of having to put it in every single one,
Mhm.
just have one function
I like
that'll
it.
do it every time?
I like it. Yes, let's write it as a big function, and then let's separate that piece out. We're going to separate out validating that the number they gave us was good. So very first, what did we decide we were going to call this function? Get valid number, or was it age? Get valid age from user. Okay, we decided that there were no inputs. The output would be an int. And we need to give it a function body. So I'm going to give it curly braces right here. And this type static, just believe me. Yeah, and for some reason, all of my things are broken. So I'm actually going to close this folder and do a new one because everything is broken. All right, here we go. We just said int get valid age from user, no parameter list, curly brackets, typing static because that's just what we do. And the same problem. Oh, I hate you. Yeah, well,
Because it has to be inside of the main.
no, you can't nest function definitions within function definitions. It is inside of this class. What it's saying is there is already a function called get valid age from user. There clearly isn't. So this is Visual Studio Code being silly. All right, we've defined the function header now. We've got all the parts, the name, the parameter list, the return type. We've got our function body, which is empty right now. So now we need to return a value, right? That's part of a function. So for now, I'm going to give it a default return value. This would be a silly thing to do in your real app, right? We don't always want to say 0 when someone asks us our age, because that would be like talking to my very silly daughter. Okay? She's wonderful, by the way. All right, so what does this function need to do? It needs to ask the user for a number. It needs to make sure it's a number and then return that number. So what comes next in this function? What are the steps to doing all of that?
Console.writeLine.
Console.writeLine, very good. Anyone want to take a crack at this coherent question?
Give me your age.
Give me your age. Wonderful. Okay. What's next?
You have to assign the input to something.
Okay. Let's return it.
Well, you need to convert it.
Var age is equal to convert to int 32. Bada bing, bada boom. Input. Okay. And then we'll return age. So this is saying when the function is called, do these things and then return the value of the age variable. So let's give this a try. I don't think we're done quite yet, but this is a good start. Okay, we're calling the function up here. We're using the name. We're handing it arguments for every parameter that it requires, which was none. And then we're going to create a thing to store the return value of the function. Int age is equal to get valid age from user. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. Don't net run. Give me your age, 26. Everything seems to be good. Now let's try this. Give me your age. Pancakes. Error. And everything stopped working. All right. We need to validate that the user gave us an actual number. Right? Remember in the flow chart, we have this decision to make. We ask the user to enter their age, then we ask the question, did the user enter a valid age? If yes, go on to the next question. If no, ask them to enter their age again. So the suggestion up here was, let's make this validation a separate function. And I think that's a smart thing to do right now. So let's create a new function. What should the name of this function be that takes in a string and sees if it's a valid number? Good name.
Verified number.
Is it all numbers?
The question is, are they all numbers? The answer is no. One of them is, are you married? 6.
Validate user entry.
Validate user entry, okay. Validate user entry. In order to do validation on a user entry, what input do we need? No. What are the inputs to this function? If you come to me and ask me, will you validate this user entry? I would be like, yes.
What is the user entry?
What is the user entry? You would hand me back a 6. Bah.
27.
So, number. So when I say, don't make me start doing skits, guys. I will do a skit. So I'm asking when a function or something else is going to call me and say, verify this input for me, you have to provide me something if you want me to verify the input.
True or false?
True or false?
Are we talking about the return type or the?
Nope.
Okay.
Parameter list. What would the parameter list contain?
The user.
User input. I like it. I'm going to call it that. And I've got the insert key pressed apparently, so string user input. Okay, there's our parameter list. What should the return type, when I have completed the activity of validating the user entry, what would you expect back? True or false? Bool, I like it. Okay, type this because you believe in me, and a function body. All right. Now, I'm going to copy and paste some code that we haven't ever talked about that will be of use to you. It is code that will tell you whether or not a value is actually a number. And I'm going to take all of this code. This uses a function called tryparse, which basically does exactly what we want to know. Is a number a valid number or not? Okay. Right here, this line is really all I wanted. Okay, let's walk through this that I just copied and pasted. I'm declaring a number variable. Then I'm calling a function int32.tryparse. All this is doing is returning me a bool saying whether or not the string I provided, it can be changed into a number. So if I put in pancakes, tryparse would return false. If I put in a string that just said 66, it would return true. That's what I get here, was successful. Okay, tryparse gives us a little bit extra. It uses something that you don't even need to concern yourself about, which is an output parameter. It's the user input parsed as a number. But just know that tryparse is a function we can use that says whether something can be changed into a number or not. Okay? All right, we've got our function now. I said that I will validate user entry. If you give me a user input, I will tell you true or false. Okay, and I'm returning a Boolean right here. So let's use, does anyone have any questions up to this point? Let's use this function to complete this function now, right? Remember, if they didn't give us a valid number, we're going to keep asking until they do give us a valid number. So I'm going to declare a bool variable, and I'm going to set it to false, because the very first time I ask them, I want this loop to happen. I'm going to say, while is valid number is equal to false, I'm going to ask them for the age. I'm going to put this inside of my loop, right? I'm going to say, give me your age. I'm going to read in their age. And then I'm going to call my other function and say, is valid number is equal to validate user entry, input. Okay.
Do that again.
Sure. So I added this loop right here, right? I have my lines of code. I added this loop. I said, is it a valid number? I'm going to set it to false. Then I'm going to go in this loop and I'm going to say, while this variable's value is false, I want you to repeat these statements. And I'll move them up one at a time now. So I always want you, while the valid number is not valid, I always want you to ask for the age. And then I always want you to come back and record what the user typed. And then I want to call my function and say a function that tells me if user input is valid, can you see if what the user just typed is actually a number? That will return true. And I'm actually not even going to use this secondary variable. I'm just going to set is valid number already. Right? And then I'm going to set the age variable. By copying this line that I already had. Notice I moved the declaration of the age variable up here, and now I'm just going to set it inside the loop. So let's walk through everything that we just did. This was a lot in a short amount of time, okay? Now, I'm going to zoom out slightly. Can everyone still see that? In the back? Yeah? I'm looking at Randy. Okay. So let's walk through this. Get valid age from user is called in the main function, which is the entry point to our program. So we call this, we jump down here, and we say, okay, give me an age variable so I can store the age later on and give it a default value of 0. Then set this variable that will tell me whether the user entered a valid age or not. The user has entered nothing at this point, so we're going to default to not valid. And then we say, while the age that they gave me is not valid, I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to ask them for their age, read in the input, ask the question if it was a valid number or not, and then set the age. Okay? This validate user entry function is going to try to change whatever the user typed to a number. int32.tryparse returns me a true or false. Yes, I could convert it to a number, or no, I couldn't convert it to a number. This function returns that piece of information right here, and it will set is valid number. Then we set the age. And actually, we need to only do this if is valid number is true. Otherwise, our program will blow up again. So let's run it. Let's try this. I'm going to run. Does anyone have any questions about this? Okay, I will also put this up in the lunch learning Slack channel that we have. It's everything inside of class. So if you want to, you can get it from there. Doopy-doopy-doo. I'll add it as a code snippet so it looks beautiful. And I will press the send button, very important. Okay, let's run this. So I'm going to open this terminal, and I'm going to go .NET run. Very first, give me your age. I'm going to try pancakes again. Give me your age. Waffles. Give me your age. 31. Program exits. Okay? So no blowy uppy program at this point. We have successfully validated whether or not they are entering a good age. At this point, would you like to step through this, or would you like to write another function?
Let's just step through it.
Step through it. Yep. Okay, I am now going to debug. By adding a breakpoint here, go to the debug menu, let's debug. Okay, this is the entry point for our program. When main is called, the very first thing we're going to do is call the get valid age from user function is the word I'm looking for. So now it's important to step into. Step into means go to that function. Step over would mean call that function and then return, and then let's keep debugging. But that's not what I want. I want to step into this function. So you can see I jump down to line 14. Right? Age is 0, set my defaults on my variables, and I'm going to start this loop, and then I'm going to output, give me your age, and you see that down here in the console, and then I'm going to tell the console to wait for my input. I'm going to come down here and give some input, and I will say, of course, come on, console, truffles. You typing? Okay, we're going to have to start over. Okay, here we go. So we're stepping in. Come down here and say, truffles. Oh, I hate you, Visual Studio Code. I hate you. I hate you. Not happy. Start again, debugging again. Hit this breakpoint. We're going to step in, F12. If I could just collapse this menu right here, that would make my life better. Step into is F11. F11, here we go. Step, 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 step. Why can't I scroll down in this terminal? Oh, it's because that's the debug console. You fool. Right here, everybody. It's right here. All right, I don't know what's going on. So we're going to manually debug it. Entry point to the program, call this function. So we're going to jump down here, and we're going to do this line. And we start looping, we ask for the age, user types an age, and then we're going to go from here and call this function. So we're jumping out of that function into this function. We're going to take the input that the user typed. We're going to try and convert it to a number. This tells us, yes, I was able to, no, I wasn't able to. We'll return that. So we jump back up to the call site and we set is valid number, which is also the thing in our loop that says, should I keep asking for your input? If it was a valid number, we're going to set the age variable, and then we come back to the top of the loop and ask, is it a valid number? If they typed a valid number, is valid number got set to true right here. Otherwise, we're going to go through this whole thing again. So if the input was truffles right here, we come here, what does this function return? Validate user entry.
False.
False, okay. If false, are we going to execute this line? Nope. Okay, we jump back up to the top of the loop. Is this false? Yes, it is. So then we're going to do everything inside the loop again, including ask for input and try and parse it and conditionally set the age. Okay?
May I ask?
We got a question.
Yes. Instead of bool was successful in 32, try parse user input out number,
Mm-hmm.
can I have it output a string instead? So like if we were asking if they're married or not, if it was the user input a number, can I try parse to see if it was letters?
Okay, the question is, later on we need to ask the user for different kinds of valid inputs. They have to type yes or no. The answer is you can't use try parse for that. What you'll have to do, let's just create another function for that real quick. We've got 5 minutes left. So I'm going to create a function that returns a bool. It's called isValidAnswer. I'm going to hand as an input the answer, and then I'm going to see inside of my function if what they typed was correct, right? So I can do something like if answer is equal to no. Return true, right? And there's lots of permutations of no here. So I might end up doing something like this. Or something like this.
And capital L, lowercase n.
Why not? Or this. Or maybe this. Right?
Just a single letter N.
Yeah, or a single letter N. Right, so this is how I'm going to have to check for valid input, right? If you want to not do this, you can also do case insensitive comparisons. That's not something we really covered, but if I were just to real quick Google C# case, caps lock, case insensitive equals. Is there a C# case insensitive equals operator? The answer is no, you need to do this with this. Ignore case, right? Okay, we've just got a few minutes left here in class before those folks barge in and take our room. So does anyone have any closing remarks or questions? I will tell you that next 4 sessions, it's just going to be working on the project, going back over concepts. Feel free to come and type along. Feel free to come and listen to music or whatever and do the app by yourself. Any questions at all? Eric Tang, any cautionary tales? Advice?
Well, all I would say is don't try to do everything all at once. Just make sure you make your work and work on it in bite-sized chunks. And if you run into any issues or questions, feel free to post on the channel and answer any questions.
Very good. So for those listening to the recording, Eric's advice was to try and do this in bite-sized chunks. Don't try and put it all in one function called main. By breaking it up you'll do yourself a favor. Okay, bye.